So open that page, I'll search for my fix, find what I need in the deep dark abyss.
Hey, we're back. And it's not just us today, it's also my good friend Nicole. Hi.
Hi, Nicole.
Hey, Jake.
Welcome. So glad you're here.
Jake,
too. Thanks for having me.
Do you have yours, Jake?
Oh, mine is an ebook, so we're going to have to just imagine I'm holding up my Braverman.
I got to say, this is a really exciting opportunity to talk to Nicole. This is one of the reasons we started the podcast. I'm going to go bigger. I'm going to say,
whoa,
we tried to write a book based on this book, which, by the way, okay, let's just talk about the family tree here. Nicole told me to read this. I then told you, Jake, to read this. I got really excited about it. I was like, Jake, let's write a book that's like just this book, except for 2025 and incorporating AI. And we're like, yeah, let's do that. We spent like 8 months writing a book proposal for that. And then we were like,
you know what? The proposal was basically a book report on Braverman. That's what I love about it. It's because Braverman is so good. It's one of those books that you pick up and you're just like, wait, this was written, how many, 50 years ago? Okay. Yeah. It could have been written yesterday. Like it could have been written tomorrow. It's just so on point that it's amazing. So
it's such a great book. And also you're just like, wait, missing a few chapters. And you're like, oh, it was written in 1975. That's why.
Yeah.
And about stuff that happened 50 years before that. So it's like this kind of thing where you're just like, we should write a new version of this.
Yeah.
And anyway, to finish the story, like we decided, let's just start a podcast instead of write the book. And that's how so anyway, this book is really fundamental to the notion of this podcast.
That's exciting.
Yeah. So, we decided, since you're the world's expert on this.
Oh yeah. World's expert.
And, you wrote, like, where was that thing, that essay you wrote about it? And you reviewed a new book?
Yeah. That was in Catalyst. I actually wrote it, partly on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of this book.
No way.
Yeah, so that was in 2024. So,
okay,
you were pretty close there.
Okay, so
yeah,
I round up.
So I wrote a review that included essentially a love letter to Braverman. But this book is fundamental for me. I've used it in all my work since I was a young scholar. So. Excited to talk about it. I'm
so excited. Like, I'm hoping that in this half hour, you can do some of that translating or projecting, like, what would Braverman have said about some current topics that were not around when he wrote in 1974. So,
and it is that kind of book. I mean, if we give you no other impression, dear listener, or watcher, if you're on YouTube, then it should be that Braverman doesn't just tell you some stuff that happened. It sets up like a theory of how things happen that seems to really explain a lot.
Yeah.
And what we're going to do now, because we like to embarrass ourselves, is we're going to tell you what this book is about.
You're not going to embarrass yourself.
First, Jake is going to say it, and I'm letting him go first because he wanted to discuss our 2-minute things. We're gonna hold ourselves to 2 minutes. And he wanted to know what I was gonna say so that he doesn't say the same thing. And I was like, we're not gonna say the same thing. So I was like, just go first, and then it'll be on me if we say the same thing. So, Jake, you start 2 minutes or so, and then I'll do my 2 minutes. Yeah.
2 minutes on what is Braverman. So, first of all, the Braverman book is called Labor and Monopoly Capital. It's from 1974, and it talks about how the labor process is transformed under the capitalist system. And it's transformed in a way so that the capital owner and not the worker gets to capture all the surplus. There's like a lot of jargon in there. So I'll just say that Braverman illustrates it beautifully with these concrete examples of workers in like factory or even in moving big, heavy rocks kind of profession. And also in like secretarial profession, if you imagine the 50s, 60s, 70s. And to make like the surplus concrete, it just means that workers have no more free time. They're constantly surveilled, and every single movement, every tiny movement of a secretary to open a drawer or press a key on a typewriter is measured and managed down to the microsecond so that it's all efficient. And that efficiency serves the capital owner. So that's like my very quick, like, what was Braverman describing? But then with the rest of my 2 minutes, the other 30 seconds. I'm going to say this image that that sticks with me from the book, and that is describing how that process of breaking down the labor process, like it results in power concentrating to an ever smaller group of managers and misery accruing to an ever growing group of the rest of us. So that dynamic of how like power and misery ends up concentrated to different ends of the spectrum, and all the power is going to that a smaller and smaller group. I thought that was an amazing consequence of his theory. So that's my 2 minutes on Braverman.
Yeah. That's great.
I love that. I love that. Great 2 minutes. I'm going to say that you did kind of say what I was going to say, but I'm going to.
I knew it. I knew I was going to do it.
No, but I'm going to give it a different spin, because I mean everything you said was true. My focus when I think about Braverman's, construction or explanation of how things work is more about control and information. And so like we have this notion of that we talked about, we call it spreadsheet thinking, like putting everything into a spreadsheet. Like management consultants, like we need a spreadsheet for this. What does a spreadsheet really represent? It represents like codifying something that was that knowledge, like artisanal knowledge of somebody's like ability to be a machinist or ability to cook bread really well or whatever it is. Like it's like a person figures something out that's like very human, very like useful to them. And then the managers put it in a spreadsheet. The managers then have control over it. The managers then actually automate it in a certain way. And it edges out the need for those workers not to have knowledge. The workers become more and more like drones. They're just doing like putting more flour into the mixer if they're at a bread manufacturer or whatever. So it used to be that like people would actually make the bread, but now the average worker is like doing something really dumb. And so it's the same conclusion as what you're saying, Jake. But for me, I focus my emphasis is on how knowledge of, human necessary tasks of any sort. And this includes like matchmaking. Like you could see this happening in Tinder, right? It doesn't have to be work. It could be like anything that we actually experience as humans, but the knowledge has gone from like, people that were really knowledgeable and smart about things to some kind of automated process. And that process is owned and controlled by the management that you were talking about. So it's just, but I'm looking at where does that information go? Like who owns the information, the knowledge? And it's always going up to the managers or the managers' managers. Okay, now it's your turn.
Yeah.
That was good. Okay,
you guys both did a really good job, I think.
Oh, thanks.
Yay.
Yeah. All right. So let me maybe zoom back a little. I think those were really key points for me. I think one of the reason why I'm sort of a Braverman evangelist and why I was pushing this book on Kathy in one of our 1 million conversations, is that I think that something that Braverman does, which is really key, is first, of course, he insists that we look at work, right, and the kind of social relationship that undergirds work, and looks at the power dynamics inherent in that, in particular. And that's why he makes such an emphasis that he's interested in the labor process, but specifically the labor process in capitalism, right? And what are the kind of dynamics that come out of that? And in particular, how does that impact us as human workers, right? He's really interested in the sort of qualities of human work, our creativity, our capacity for flexibility. And one of the things that I think is really key for Braverman is to talk about how, what you guys were talking about, this key element of human work is the separation between conception and execution, right? And we're able to actually plan something before we do it. And the fact that we have to work in capitalism, the fact that we have to sell our labor power, means it's always in the interest of management to actually control conception, right? To make us only the people who have to sell our labor, the ones who are actually carrying out, but not planning the work and not reaping the benefits of it. And I think one of the things that makes this book so relevant now, right, this is not just a process that happened in the past with like the Industrial Revolution, right? He's saying like this capacity for us to work and the inalienable quality of our own labor means that this is a permanent feature of capitalism, right? So we're always seeing a reproduction of this dynamic where our creativity, our artisanal knowledge is being taken and automated, right? It's not something that happened in the past. It's something that happens over and over and over. And it's part of the process of capital accumulation. And I think that's like really key for us, particularly when we're thinking about AI, which is often taken out of history, right? The whole process of is taken out as this ahistorical sort of natural, thing that has happened, which is a totally technologically determinist framing.
Okay, I mean, great. Thank you. I mean, I love that. And I'm just going to I have two comments. One of them is like, and I'm going straight into the AI thing. One of the great examples that he really goes into in depth was like Taylor, who spent, I want to say 36 years, like studying machinists.
Yeah.
And figuring out exactly when they do what.
Yeah.
Like what kind of metal, what kind of router, what angle, and what, all this kind of stuff in order to implement a certain type of sheet metal cutting. And it took him 36 years.
Yeah.
And he did it. And he had like completely codified a certain type of really important process in machinism or machinists' work. And I want to compare that now to how AI like goes over the internet and like crawls the internet and like takes the IP on like virtually like thousands of different kinds of professions. Not all of them. I don't think the FBI and the CIA ever have to worry about, automated AI, investigations, but things like Jake's wife's Chelsea's job, like advertising, things like computer programming, which like the computer programmers literally handed to the scrapers when they built Stack Overflow.
Yep.
And Stack Exchange. Like it was just like in the perfect format. Q&A. How do I do this? How do I do that? So it's just the contrast of 36 years in a particular like scientific laboratory setting of figuring out exactly how a machinist does their thing. And then it worked. And then you never had the same kind of job as a machinist after that, right? Mm-hmm. Or soon after that. Whereas like now it's happening at lightning speed. Just like but that's how, okay, so that's important that it's happening quickly. But I think what's even more important is that Braverman has given us a way of thinking about what's actually happening when AI is, when like tech companies are like trolling the internet and grabbing everything.
Yeah. What
they're actually doing is what Taylor did, but they're doing it at scale all the time everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. You want me to, or does Jake want to? Jake, do you want to say something?
Well, Nicole, if you want to respond to that, go ahead. I have a question for you too.
Okay. Well, I think one of the key things that key points that Braverman makes about Taylor is that Taylor didn't actually improve like the technical process or the scientific sort of, on the sort of processes that undergirded, making metal or any of these kinds of things, but rather he focused on controlling the workers, right? And actually using all of his so-called scientific management was about taking away power of workers to control the way they work. And it was really, that's why the subtitle of this book is The Degradation of Work. It wasn't that he was such a scientific genius. It was that he figured out how important it was for management to take away the ability of the worker to, conceive of and plan how they wanted to work. And I think that is really key when we think about, AI using that framework. It's not this sort of magical process. Really, we should think about it as automation, right? Being used to the end of degrading work, right? To think about it in the language of degradation. And I think that's really key.
I was just in a band. I'm sorry, Jake. I know you wanted to say something, but I got to interrupt. I was just in a band called the Beagles. We were very cute. We played at the Bedford Brewing Company. All of our songs are about dogs. And one of our singers, I was like, well, what do you do for work? Yeah. And she's like, well, I'm a computer programmer, but I'm leaving and becoming a masseuse. And I was like, okay, that's kind of a interesting change. What what made you change? What made you decide to move? And she was like, well, I always wanted to be a masseuse, but really what happened was like, I'm a computer programmer and now everybody's using AI and it's just taken absolutely all of the fun and the play out of my job.
Yeah.
Because the fun and the play was figuring out like little puzzles. And now everybody uses AI. We're forced to. And if we don't, like, we can't keep up and there's blah, blah, blah. So it's just copying and pasting and checking, but checking isn't fun.
Yeah.
It's like the fun has been removed from my job. I'm leaving. And I was like, damn, that is a fact. To your point, like that's one of the reasons I think companies love AI. It's like they don't need workers that can make choices. They don't need problem solvers anymore.
Yeah.
They just need copy and pasters.
Yeah. Who they can pay much less.
And that was part of Braverman's narrative, is how the breaking down of the labor process allows the capitalist to push down to the lowest possible skill level each micro task, so that they're never overpaying a worker who has these extra skills that they're not using. And Nicole, I love that you brought in the word degradation. I think that makes a lot of sense here. And it's like, I'm remembering how in the Braverman book, when he talks about Frederick Winslow Taylor and automating the machinist job, when he tells that story of all those years he spent in the factory, it was striking to me how the workers were really pissed. Like every time he would find out something new, the strongest among you can like carry this many heavy hunks of metal across the machine floor in this many minutes or seconds. And then immediately he wants to hold everybody to that standard. That's like the scientific management approach or whatever. And the workers were pissed because they were like, well, you're just telling us we all have to work as hard as that hardest working guy who we all hate. And plus he's physically bigger than all of us. So the workers really resisted the automation push, as I recall in Braverman's account. And I feel like things are a little different with AI. Like I'm going to talk about a slightly different take than Kathy did. Kathy's talking about how quickly and easily AI can scrape the internet to find out how to automate tasks. But I'm going to look at a different thing. Let's look at a task, like a knowledge worker task, like writing headlines for advertising. That task now could be partly or largely farmed out to an AI large language model. It's like, what does the resistance of workers look like in this scenario of automation, like to make a parallel to automating the machinist trade? I feel like workers are somehow being like more hoodwinked with AI. I don't know why I have that feeling. It's not being forced down my throat in my job, but what do you see in the actual process of automating tasks with AI? Is that going to play out in a similar way as it did in the era when Braverman was writing?
I mean, I work in publishing and we have these conversations all the time, right? And we have like the book company that I work for, Verso, we have a union, which is unusual in publishing. But that's a big part of our sort of conversation as workers, right? We talk about this very explicitly. But many workplaces, like, this isn't even a possibility. Or, one of the things that Braverman says about Taylor in here is like, we also think about Taylor as being this guy from the 19th century. But in fact, all of the lessons that Taylor gave to managers have been completely incorporated and perfected. Like, you look at a company like Amazon, they are the Taylor of the 21st century. They've done it perfectly. And I think, so the question of resistance, well, workers have a lot against them. And part of this, and Kathy and I were talking about this a couple weeks ago, is just the kind of ideological framing of AI, right? As this kind of miracle force outside of the social relation, something that we just have to adapt to, right? Rather than, the other way around, as like, okay, technology comes from society rather than technology shapes society. So, your average worker is like, well, I'm I'm dumber than this AI, so it should be, only right that it take my job, right? There's so many things wrong with that, but that's the message we're getting over and over. Even when you see these ChatGPT commercials on TV, which I hate so much, right? The underlying message there is like humans are frail, our brains are limited, like we have to just give over to this greater technology, and if that means we'll lose our jobs, well, we'll reach some technological utopia in the future as a result. So we need to suffer the pain now. And I think that's exactly the wrong approach.
Yeah. I mean, I what I like to do is just sort of apply this framework, Braverman framework, to absolutely everything in sight. So I'm going to start right now with like teachers, right? Now we want to bring you back to talk about like teaching in the age of AI, because I know you have really interesting things. I mean, you could say those things now, of course, but I also feel like going back to your earlier point that like the whole idea of this scientific approach, Taylorism, whatever, is to remove the possibility of choices from the worker. I feel like that's exactly what's happening to teachers, right? They're being given these tools, these AI tools that literally build their curriculum for them. Build all of their content. And the idea is that they should be grateful for that. To Jake's point, they're not, somehow it's not framed as like, this is going to take your job from you, even though it is. Because, as we saw with all the examples in Braverman and all the examples we could think of, like once your choices are limited, like you don't need to be paid that well. You can be replaced by somebody less skilled.
Yeah. And it's like your friend, the computer programmer, who's going to want to be a teacher and put in all of that work, because it's so hard to be a teacher when you don't have any control over your pedagogy or your curriculum. But I think the important thing, since if we're talking about teaching and we don't have to get into it too much, is like, this is not a problem for teachers that has emerged with AI. This has been a problem for decades that teachers have grappled with having less and less control over the classroom. And so here we see AI coming into a social process or a trajectory that's already in place and just speeding it up, right? Speeding up the degradation of work. And I think that's another key thing too, right? When you're saying, let me apply Braverman, like this is a way you can apply it too, like that takeaway.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like one of the things that Braverman talks about at the end of the book is like management consultants as an industry. Like he thinks of management consultants as an industry as sort of like the Taylorization of everything in sight, which is true. Like management consultants, their job is to go in with their clipboards and build spreadsheets and, get rid of excess or whatever. But what that really means is like exert control and steal information, like let management own it and control the workers. I think to that point that you could also argue that private equity is, a descendant of this. When you think about, and this is one of the chapters that we thought about writing in our book proposal, which isn't dead per se, but we're going to have to revise it. But like we had a whole chapter on kind of like Braverman as it like the theory that behind Braverman as it applies to like nursing homes, which is completely owned by private equity. Not completely, but in certain areas of the country, quite substantially owned by private equity. And then when you think about how it's been minimized to the law, right? Of like how many workers do you have and how many beds do you have per nurse and how many, like everything is just at its bare minimum. And the people who work there are paid minimum wage. And they are given minimum control over their job and their job experience. And it's not to mention that of course, the people living there are often given like minimal control over their experience. So it's kind of a Braverman distillation.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with AI, of course.
Yep, exactly. I think that's key, right? To not get swept up into the AI framing and to actually situate AI in this sort of broader degradation of work, for sure.
Nicole, I want to ask you about connective labor. I think that it was in your essay that we read about that, right? Was it in your review of Braverman?
Yeah, I reviewed Alison Pugh's book. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what connective labor means and how it fits into this Braverman conversation?
Yeah, so I'm actually a fan of Alison's work, and this was a new book that she had put out. I ended up being pretty critical of the book, but she was basically describing, she did hundreds of interviews over the course of several years, what she perceived as like a new type of labor, which is connective labor. And I didn't quibble of, okay, whether this is actually new or why it's happening or how it relates to sort of emotional markets or the commodification of women's work. Setting all that aside, she's basically saying like it has become the norm increasingly in particularly service sector jobs, but also caring professions that we expect connective labor to be part of the labor process. And it's like very key to...
What is connective labor?
Connective labor is basically labor that relies on some of the sort of more psychological, emotional, interactive elements of work, right? So we can imagine a nurse, right? A nurse isn't just giving you a shot or like cleaning you. A nurse is like reassuring you and checking on your well-being and seeing your suffering and giving you comfort, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can think about this, but also she says like maybe your hairdresser or obviously a teacher or a doctor, like all of these people perform connective labor, and it's as a proportion of the workforce, it's growing, right? She's saying,
speaking as someone who just had my cavity filled today, I really appreciated my dentist having that aspect.
Did they have a good bedside manner, or what I mean?
She's pretty good.
Yeah,
Dr. Babbo, Mass Ave in Cambridge. Just everybody.
That's good.
Yeah, she's good.
So in the book, Alison Pugh is basically saying, well, that's great. Okay, that we see this new type of labor. And unfortunately, because we live in capitalism, though I don't think she ever said that, that's just me, the Marxist sort of saying it, we see immediately this connective labor being impinged upon and tried, controlled and basically adapted to algorithms, and we see companies coming in wanting to use chatbots and so on to actually sort of make effective connective labor more efficient, right, and extract more value from it. And of course, as expected, this is disastrous.
So this is one of our favorite topics here on AI Skeptics, which is just like complaining about the synthetic niceness of chatbots.
Yeah.
So that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, as if that could replace like a real interaction, right? Because one of the things that we think about is like, well, rich people aren't going to be, having a healthcare appointment through a chatbot. That's going to be something that poor people are going to have in place of an already, sporadic or rushed visit with a doctor, right? So we're being told that, well, this is just as good or better because it's trained by these large language models or because it uses digital technology. When in fact, like if we were to apply Braverman to something like connective labor, we could see a continuation of a very long process. Actually, no, what we're seeing is the degradation of work in new spheres.
Yeah, it sounds to me like it's just like what's coming up is the degradation, as you say, of like the last human inefficient thing that we have, which is like the extra 10 seconds that the barista takes to have, to exchange one comment with you. Like that's inefficient, certainly. Or that you're hygienist.
Sorry, Jake, to interrupt, but like just went to the Logan airport like for a really early morning flight, and there was a cafe open, thank God, but like you couldn't order from someone. You had to put it into
on the iPad?
On the iPad, and then the person just handed it over. Like they never made there was no eye contact at all. And maybe they didn't want eye contact, but it was just like, oh shit, this person will be replaced as soon as they can by a machine. And by the way, the last thing I will say, because we're running out of time, sadly, but I have been told by my friend Ezra that this is the perfect length. It's exactly as long as his commute. So hi, Ezra. I hope you're pulling into work. Which is that the thing I like a lot about Braverman, besides everything about it, is like, it's degradation of labor, but really it's not just labor. I keep coming back to that, like degradation of dating. degradation of, elder care, degradation of child care. I mean, you can put anything, any kind of human community experience that we do, has become degraded in this way. And we can always think about it from the Braverman perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree.
And what's great about having you in one of these early podcasts is now we can always refer back to this podcast, and we shall we, Jake?
The Braverman episode. The Braverman episode has been
Braverman episode. That's the name of this one. We want to end with something positive. We were told from early reviewers that we're too negative. And we had this for a couple episodes, we had this, what's your pet peeve? And for some reason that wasn't.
I have so many.
I know, the pet peeves are easier. Do you have anything positive that you wanted to mention?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot here to go.
Well, Jake can start.
I'll buy you a little time. Here's the way I took a positive thing. It was what's some tech that I am really in favor of? And here it is, folks. Email. Good old fashioned email. This is a chance to plug our new email address for the show.
Yes.
If you have a question, a comment, a topic that you'd like us to talk about on a future episode, write to us at aiskeptics@oceannetwork.net. No punctuation, no spaces, aiskeptics@oceannetwork.net. And we'll get your email and consider it. And we'll talk about that question.
Yeah, we love
topic.
emails. We love comments and questions from our listeners. I will just say, and this is very small, and it's allowed to be small, but I only had to pay $27.50 for as a copay for my cavity. Which I'm just in this day and age, can you imagine having a fully grown doctor who's giving me, what is it called? A connective attention, for a whole hour tending to me. And I ended up actually paying much less than I thought I would. And I was like, okay, I'm actually grateful for my dental insurance, which by the way is ending next month. So I'm getting it all done before February 28th. That's my positive thing.
I'll pick a positive thing from Braverman then, since we get ended on that. One of the things I love about Braverman is that he insists on the creativity and just sort of unreproducible essence of a human work and our ability to come up with new ideas and to make our lives better. And I think that's positive, and that's the way out of all of this. So.
And that's beautiful too.
Wow. Thank you, Nicole.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us for this very important.
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.